Greetings and salutations. So, this morning, like this thumbnail suggests, we've got a chat about Sundiver by David Brin. It was a very unexpected reading experience. So, very unexpected. I would give it 2 out of 5 stars, which would suggest it's not my favourite book ever, which it wasn't. I actually found the start of the book very, very disconcerting. I liked where we started right at the beginning, where we've got our main character, Jacob, and he's swimming with dolphins. It's obviously part of the Uplift. The dolphins are on the way to being brought to intelligence. There's some kind of gurney. I liked that small, tiny fragment. But the writing overall I found very odd. I saw that one coming. See, this is meant to be the first in the Uplift series. The cover doesn't tell me that. The cover tells me that it's author of the Startide Rising and the Practice Effect. But everything else, the internet and everything, says that this is the #1 and the #2 in the Uplift series is Startide Rising, which I read and loved. And with Startide Rising, I accepted that as in book #2, there were going to be things I didn't know and things I didn't understand. I was going to have to play catch up. There were going to be references to events from previous books, right? I'm good with that. And I've got to say, Startide Rising did that very, very well. Short explanations of other characters and other events, how the ship came to be crashing into the ocean, all of that worked substantially well. And as a result, I thought that #1 was going to be in some way related to #2. And as far as I can tell, it's got absolutely nothing to do with #2. And also, as a #1, I expect it to be a whole book, and it doesn't feel like one. The main character keeps talking about prior events, lots of prior events, all the time, that affect almost everything about it. So it comes across as a #2 in a series, or maybe even a 3 and a 4. So no heads, no heads. So our main protagonist, Jacob, is recruited from playing with dolphins to go on some mysterious expedition to the Hermes station on Mercury, where there's various ships that are diving into the sun, Sundiver, right? He's recruited by an alien. Think of a mobile tree. Please don't chew my clothes. Who he apparently knows from previous events and expeditions that we don't know anything about, because this #1 keeps referring to books that aren't #1. It's really, I was nonplussed by most of that. And it's slow. It's really slow. So around about page 120, I started wondering if I had read it before and either did not finish it or didn't remember it at all. So this book came out in 1980. Startide Rising, I think, came out in 83. There's a good couple of decades there where I could have read it and forgotten about it. It wouldn't have been memorable. And without this review, it wouldn't be memorable. Oh, well done. Look. Miller landed on my shoulder. Well done, Miller. I believed that I had discovered David Brin for the first time early this year, late last year. And I was loving his writing. I really enjoyed Startide Rising, which was action-packed, full of different storylines, full of different characters that all come together. But this isn't like Startide Rising. The action is few and far between, and it's disjointed. It isn't like Glory Season, which has a brutal and invigorating social commentary with a huge number of really interesting characters doing really interesting things. Instead, it's just kind of, I don't know, meh. It's like this slow conceptual piece that aims to talk a lot about science, but very basic science, and there's an introduction to a whole heap of alien species and what they're doing in the universe. Oh, and of course the library. We are introduced to the library. And I honestly never thought I would meet a library in any work of literature that I didn't love. But this library, if you can call it a library, I don't. it's malign, and the people who officiate it are malignant. And part of this opinion comes from Startide Rising, but I think that I would have recognised this as a very, very nasty influence just from this book alone. So, I did enjoy the fact that I got a little bit more about the Uplift universe. In Startide Rising, we're introduced to the notion that you've got client races, you've got an intelligent species that finds another species either on their world or on another one that is rising towards intelligence. They gather them together, and through genetic manipulation and training and a whole heap of other things, they uplift them to intelligence. That species is then a client species. And the universe allows for these clienthoods to be officially recognized for things like thousands and thousands of years. So basically, you and your entire species are a slave for thousands and thousands of years, and there are a few ways to get out of it that I hinted at briefly, but overall, it's an interesting concept. It's pretty nasty in a few ways. I guess Brin has got a lot to say about slavery in there. But despite the element of enjoying parts of this universe and its description, I was at no point sucked in because there's too much of it and it's not well enough done. So I did like the oh-so-subtle descriptions of scientific-based theories in the first third of the book. That's pretty much all there was to enjoy in the first third of the book, though, to be honest. So you've got this refutation of evidence. Brin uses the argument for or against solar worship in the actual book. These are people who believe... Honestly, I don't know what they believe. They're described as crazies who worship the sun and think that the sun uplifted the human species or something like that. Not sure. And he uses this as a way to talk about insufficient evidence to support a hypothesis and also the minimum evidence required to refute a hypothesis. I like that. I like the take on nature versus nurture, which is debate. It's a very relevant and ongoing and always will be probably debate in biological sciences. And here, Brin moots it through the uplift versus evolution, because the universe believes that no species can evolve into intelligence, that they have to be uplifted by another one. And they do have the concept of species that are uplifted to intelligence, and then their uplift masters, whatever they call them, then leave them on their own, so they keep going on their own. They call those wolfling species, so humanity is a wolfling species. But humanity has got no indication that they had been uplifted, and there's a very good argument for evolution. So that was interesting as well. My interpretation was nature versus nurture debate. I suppose, since Brin, I'm pretty sure Brin is an American author, he might also be referencing the science versus religion debate, which seems to be a thing in America. But in terms of nature versus nurture, I really liked it. So yes, those, first third of the book. Unfortunately, that was all of the first third of the book that I really got on board with. Then we get to Hermes and start talking about the Sundiver project and diving into the sun. I was not wild about the solar science. I couldn't follow it all. I'm no astrophysicist or mathematician or physicist in general, but I feel that a book that isn't a technical manual should be presented in such a way that the general population can read it. I would love to hear if anyone could follow all the solar science and found it interesting. I imagine some people did. Yeah, not me. But it was during that time that I started wondering if I had actually read this book before. I think there's a good argument for it. There were a couple of, I wouldn't say events or characters, because there's so few events in the first third and the characters were so diffuse they were virtually non-existent. But there was a point where we were being lectured about solar flares and the different heat differentials and stuff. I kept having to force my brain to pay attention to what I was reading. I kept wanting to skim read. I kept wanting to deflect onto other things. And at some point I went, hang on, have I been here before? That's what made me think that I possibly have read this before. I don't know if I didn't finish it. Before page 200, when something actually starts happening again, there's a lot of did not finish moments where that could have happened. Or I could have read the whole thing, but I would definitely have resorted to skim reading in the 80s, and then I would not remember it. Honestly, except for this review which I'm doing now and the one I plan to do on Goodreads, give it 7 years and I don't think I would remember this book again, because it's just not memorable. There isn't anything to be memorable, and it's very, very easy to become impatient with it. At least until around page 200 out of, mind you, 340 pages, when something finally happens. Up until then, we don't really know why our main protagonist is even there. It's like, we don't know what the project is, because Jacob keeps asking, but he keeps being deflected and told he'll find out later. He never does. Exactly what Jacob is, we never even know, because there's all these coy references to him having some sort of alter ego that he's used for investigation in the past, or to save some spindle or something that we don't know anything about. And he may have lost someone there. It's like, it's really random, and there's a lot of it. So why is Jacob there? This alien who's recruited him, we never find out why. It's like, maybe Jacob knows why, but we're not told. And this alien that he knows from another life or another set of adventures that we know nothing about, Jacob started this book working with dolphins, for goodness sake. Why is a dolphin handler going to Mercury to get on a ship that's going to dive in the sun? There ain't no dolphins there, I'm just telling you. So for most of the book I was super annoyed. Then we have 200, page 200, finally something happens. There's someone who's trying to sabotage the ship. They succeed in sabotaging one ship. One of the humans' client species dies. Not a dolphin, again. And Jacob does this big Agatha Christie style expose on one alien having done all these terrible things. And then it slows down again. No. No to chewing clothes, remember? Then it slows down again. And nothing keeps happening for a while. So I think it was in part 5, whatever page that is. I think that's before 200. Yeah, before 200. There was this point where Jacob, and we've still not been given any explanation for why his alien mate has recruited him for this project. He's about to get on a ship to dive into the sun when the last ship failed and killed someone for no reason that we know, and Jacob is still going to go on it. I mean, it's just all why? Why? No explanations are being presented. And it's frustrating. It's frustrating a lot. Okay, so obviously I didn't love the plot or the lack of it that much, and I thought the characters in my opinion, were negligible and utterly forgettable. So, subjectively, I didn't love this book. Objectively, is it a bad book? I mean, probably not, but I honestly don't think it's a great one. I think it will have its fans who don't require a plot explanation and don't require huge characterization, but it's still not a great book. The pacing is way too erratic and the writing is very disjointed at times. So often, way too often, I would turn the page, I would read the first paragraph and go, wait, what? And I'd turn back to make sure I hadn't turned over 2 pages. The sad thing is, I almost never had. It's like from one paragraph to another, all too often this book fails to make sense. Another thing it does, you've got concepts thrown in with no explanation. So there's one description, there's a psychologist type on board. Martine, I think, Dr. Martine, I think the name is. Again, a character with no purpose or meaning who never seems to do what she's allegedly meant to do. Eventually we find out she's something totally different, but by then we don't care because she's not acting as a psychologist. Nothing she does makes sense. She's obviously got other purposes. Ugh, it's just, it would be frustrating if it wasn't all so meh. Blah, meh, whatever. Anyway, so I got distracted. Yes, so apparently she's got this professional smile, and Brin has got this particular phrase for the professional smile, which is fine. But the first time he mentions it, he gives no explanation. He just throws in, professional smile, with whatever phrase he uses to describe it. And I'm going, what? Was this explained somewhere else? I don't know what he's talking about. Later, he throws in this phrase again and explains it. So what that feels to me is like in the editing process, things got shuffled around and things that appear for the first time moved, but the explanation moved with them. So you're encountering these things or these individuals or these concepts with no explanation, and later the explanation is given. Possibly this is David Brin's actual intentional writing style. This is early in his writing career. I'd say he's modified. I didn't love it. The erraticness of the writing I also didn't love. So page 200, we've got this big exciting thing and it's all happening. And then we slide back to another 70 pages of nothing happening to no one that we care about. The sun's there. There's apparently beings that live in the sun. That's interesting. It could be better done, but it's interesting. So, as a about those beings that live in the sun, I understand that they've been used as source material or an inspiration for a couple of other books and a couple of other movies. Because essentially there's some great concepts in here. They're not terribly well executed, but there's some marvellous concepts. So I can well see that the concept of the aliens and how they present would be taken by a movie. I think it's a movie I've seen, Contact. It's right on the edge of my consciousness. Anyway, if you know, mention it because I'm curious, but I'm probably not curious enough to Google it, I'm going to say. Okay, this number 1 has nothing to do with its number 2. The only tie that I can possibly see that relates them is a throwaway paragraph in the very last paragraph of the book. And that may relate to Startide Rising. This doesn't ever feel like a number 1 in any series at all. So this is a spoiler. You can stop now if you like. You've already got the gist of what I think about this book. I will say though, if you have not yet read the Uplift series by David Brin and you want to, I recommend just start with Startide Rising. You will lose nothing from not having read this book. Spoiler. The spoiler is, at the end, our main protagonist, Jacob, who was so negligible that for the first 100 or so pages I thought, hang on, is this actually the same guy that we meet in Startide Rising? I went to Startide Rising, which is further up, you can't see it, to check. No, he's a completely different character. They're written remarkably similarly though. So he gets together with the captain of the Sundiver project, Helena, and Helena's signed up to go out to a colony. Right in the last paragraph we find out they're both signed up for going to sign up for the next ship, which goes in 3 years. His only qualifier is that they've got to take the dolphin he was working with in the institute when this whole book started, who is thought of maybe once or twice in the whole 300 pages, but he's insisting they have to take her. So maybe, just possibly, one of our protagonists in Startide Rising is the son of these two here that we know nothing about 340 pages after reading about them. All the coy references to Jacob's weird mental state are eventually explained. It's okay. So, I did finish it. I did enjoy parts of it. The very, very small isolated patches like bubbles that appeared here and there were nice. The plot as it eventually comes through, is actually pretty complex, complicated and interesting. You've got lots of different politics between the different species. You've got lots of different aims and goals. Likewise, it's not consistently good, but there are good things about it. By page 200, by about page 250, I was certainly reading only to finish it. I wanted to finish this book. I wanted to have read the whole thing. And the fact that the end, it does actually get somewhat better after the 200 mark, I still wasn't invested. So I did. I finished it. A lot of the reading experience of a book, at least for me, probably for many of you as well, is what the feeling you walk away from it is. With some of them you feel satisfied and invigorated, other ones you're really keen for the next one, others you feel contented and a sense of completion. I walked away from this one feeling annoyed and unsettled. There's no way I could go straight on to another book after this, because I was too irate by the 340 page experience I'd just been for. So that is Sundiver by David Brin. Like I said, if you haven't read any David Brin, do not start with this one as my recommendation. If you haven't read The Uplift and you want to, ignore number 1. It's entirely ignorable. Go straight to number 2, which I thought was a great book. I'm not cutting David Brin off my future reading list, but I'm going to approach future Brins with some caution after this one. Some caution. So if you've read David Brin, tell me, should I go on to number 3 of The Uplift? Is there something else I should do first? I am a bit curious. It's certainly not going to happen soon, but I could make a note of it and happen later. Thank you very much for watching me whinge about a published book by a very reputable author. I hope you have a great day, and I hope you're reading better books.